Well, welcome everybody. My name is Larry Seabrack. I'm the president of the AACG, and I want to welcome you all to this, our weekly Friday meetup. This week, we're honored to have Katja and Doug Heller of the Heller Gallery of New York present a focused meetup on the Danes, the Danish glass artists that they've represented since 2006. And so I'm going to turn this over to Katja, who will introduce her program, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for discussion and questions. But if anybody has any burning questions during the presentation, which many of are going to be videos, you can present those in the chat room and I'll try to screen them. So without further ado, Katja, you want to take over? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Larry, and thank you, AACG, for inviting us to do this. We are here in New York, but we have two of the Danish artists, Stina Bidstrup and Morten Klitgaard, on the line with us, I hope, though I haven't seen them yet. But we will, so I asked Doug to sort of start this off with introducing kind of how we got to this point. And when we started introducing the Danish, or started working with the Danish artists, and then we can take it from there. And thank you, Larry, for inviting us to do this. And this was really Larry's idea, so thank you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. What a pleasure it is to be here. Actually, Heller Gallery's relationship with Scandinavian glass goes all the way back to the 70s. And we were working with Bertil Wallin and Ulrika Wallin and people from Orrefors, but we sort of tangentially became aware of a burgeoning studio glass movement that was just in its beginnings in Denmark. And then finally, after conversations, particularly with a Danish curator named Attila, we put together, in conjunction with the assistance of the Danish Council and some other support groups from Denmark, we put together an exhibition called The Danes. It was in the year 2006, and it featured 6 makers: Marianne Bus, Lenny Boker, Stefan Dahm, Nica Carlson, Tobias Moll, and Stig Persson. As time went on, it turned out that we winnowed down the relationships to 3 people, and that was Stefan Dahm, his wife Nica Carlson, and Tobias Moll. Many of you are well aware of their work. It's been seen widely throughout the States at major fairs. And in recent times, we've added other artists, and that includes Jeanette Iskandar, Stina Bidstrup, and most recently, Morten Klitgaard. And Katja, over the course of this week, had conversations with 4 of them who, because of time differences and conflicts and scheduling, couldn't be here in person. And we, as Katja just mentioned, are going to have live discussions with Stina and Morten. So I think I will let it go to Katja now.
Okay, so I just want to say that you know, one of the interesting things about kind of getting a group of people or artists from a particular country, particularly a smaller country, you know, has been to sort of see the evolution of the work with the material, in this case, with work with glass, and also the kind of ongoing kind of aesthetic thread, I think, that has developed this lineage almost, and I think that it will be interesting to see that. So when we invited, we wrote to every one of the artists after the initial conversation with Larry and asked if they would be able to present, but they, many of them, because it's a Friday evening in Denmark, it became difficult for many of them because they are off to their various weekend places, and many of them are remote, and they said that they would really be concerned about a reliable internet connection. And so I did these interviews that I recorded. I asked 4 main questions. The first one was, how did you first become involved or interested in glass, and what keeps your interest in it today? The second one was there any particular career defining moment for you? And if so, what was it? That kind of has brought your work to where it is today. And then is there anybody in the glass world or in the world that kind of led you to glass or through glass that has influenced your life or your career in a great way? And then the fourth question was, where are you today and where do you want to go? Like, what are your aspirations as an artist? And I told everybody that these are just loose questions. They don't have to answer each and every one of them, but that was kind of the skeletal bones on which to hang the story. Anyway, so I'm gonna, and in the conversations, the interesting thing was that, of course, even though I told everybody that we just were looking for 5 to 6 minutes, inevitably it became like 15 minutes or more. And I want to give a huge shout out to my colleague, Seth Scantlin, who is our webmaster, but also does all our video editing. He is an artist himself, and he did a brilliant job, in my opinion, under extreme time pressure to make these. Each of them is only 5 minutes. So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start with the 3 people who were in the original exhibition in 2006. So let me start with Tobias Moll, if I can. This is a little bit of a technical moment here for me, but I'm gonna try to do this as best I can, and just give me a thumbs up to make sure that you can actually, can everybody see the screen with this Tobias still? Great, I'm gonna play
I
it
was
now.
actually introduced to glass making at a quite young age. I was 15 when I was visiting the north of Denmark with my parents, and that was the first time that I saw a glass blower working with blowing glass. Just at the time when the studio glass movement, so to say, had begun in Denmark, and different studios were popping up around the country. And I thought that looked really interesting. I had this idea that I actually wanted to be a lawyer. But then I kept thinking about this glass blowing. I called up the factory. I spoke to the maestro, like what we call the hyttenester. He seemed to be in a good mood, and he said, "Yeah, you can begin next week, actually." And that was really it. Then I moved away from my parents and moved to another part of Denmark, and I began to blow glass as an apprentice in the Holmegaard glass factory. This is a typical factory, as you see them all over the world. There is production lines, and there are maestros and there are assistants, and you simply begin at the easiest job, maybe even just carrying work into the annealer. I think I learned a lot from going through that. I learned that not everybody loves their job, and like my parents and my family have all made their hobby into their living. My parents are musicians and so on. So then it ends with a degree. Basically, they invite maestros from other factories from Sweden and Finland, and they give you different assignments, like different things to blow, 3 of each. They have to weigh the same, and they, then you have a nice letter saying that you are a maestro. Then I quit my job the day after, which they were very upset about that. It was a studio in France where I could come and blow glass, a small studio. So that was much more interesting. And after France, I moved around a lot. I then worked on a lot of different studios for some years. And this was also the time where I met Lino Tagliapietra. I was working at the Glass Museum in Abersoft, and Lino had a show there. I had the big luck to work with Lino for a week as he was visiting the studio. And he introduced me to Pilchuck and Haystack. And, for some years after that, I was going to the States and taking classes. The whole Pilchuck was full of I remember the Lipinskis was there, William Morris was there, everybody. I was completely blown away. There is a certain catch in practicing technique. It's at one point you have to figure out then what to do with all this technique. I had a show. It was actually Lino who arranged for me to have a show at Trailer Gallery in Seattle, and that was my first bigger important solo show. Really, when I looked at all my work and realized that one thing is to learn the technique, the other thing is to cultivate and to find your own artistic language in this technique. I don't like lots of color. I like simplicity in shape, and I like simple details, which Venetian glassblowing is great for. I think it's one of the first times where I was able to make a bigger group of work that were really mine. There are different Scandinavian ceramicists that I am very attracted to. So there's someone like Jane Røymert, who I had shown with as well. There's Bodil Mann. It's an older generation of ceramicist people in Denmark that I have been very inspired by. The whole idea about light boxes actually started by solving the problem that it's always difficult to light things correctly at shows. And then it led to me looking at, all these details. I'm very interested in them. I would like them to be smaller and more delicate if possible. And there's a problem with that. There's a problem with the fact that if it's just white or black glass and the details are very small, then sometimes you can hardly see it in the wrong lighting. Then the grouping is just an interesting way to work. It's interesting for me to see the way the different patterns interact with each other and the way shapes can interact with each other. And it's just interesting for me to work like that. There's been other situations, as you know, in my family, and I've had a very long break from glassblowing right now, the longest in several years. And I'm really beginning to look very much forward to go back to work. I have a lot of things I would like to work on. I really like the idea that I have a show or something coming up, something to look forward to. I'm very much looking forward to everything opening up again and to making new work.
So that was Tobias Moll, obviously in his studio, sitting next to his most recently completed piece, who also said that he really has not been able to work as much during the lockdown, and so you heard him say that he's looking forward to going back to work. The next person we are going to hear from is Nica Carlson. As Doug mentioned, Nica and Stefan Dahm are married and they work together sometimes, but they have developed distinctly different bodies of work. So here is Nica.
My relationship with glass started with my mother. When she divorced my father, she wanted to realize a dream she had all her life, and that was to learn how to blow glass. So when I was 13 years old, she took me and my little sister to Sweden, to Orrefors, to go to the glass school there. So it was a big change for her. She enjoyed herself immensely in Sweden and learned to blow glass, and came back to Ebeltoft and started the first glass studio in Ebeltoft. Some of you might know that Ebeltoft is now a sort of a glass city in Denmark. Even though it's a small town, it has a glass museum and several studios. So I grew up with glass, but I had no intentions of doing the same thing as my mother. Then she started as a small glass school together with Stefan, also was making glass. So they were teachers and running the school. And Stefan became my boyfriend. And then there was sort of no way out. They both were like, you should try this. And I was like, no, I'm not going to. And then in the end, I of course, I gave in, and then I was just as fascinated with the material as everyone else. I met an English glass artist called John Smith, and he died several years ago, but I met him very early. He was like, what are you going to make? And I was like, I'm just going to learn how to blow the stuff. He said, no, you have to know what you want to do. And then he would be like, and when are you going to start? And then a few years later, he came to our studio we had in Aarhus, and he looked around and he said, this is all old fashioned and seen before. So it sort of kicked me in the ass to get moving. So there were people there pushing me in the direction of making, using the material in a more artistic way. My work now is very much colored by the fact that in I think it was like 2006 or 8 or something like that, I took a break from glass. I stopped making glass almost. And then I started drawing and painting and making collages. And then I went with Stefan to the Corning Museum of Glass because he had made the Rockwell Commission. And I was like, wow, this place is amazing and I love all the people and I want to come back in. And I said to Stefan, I want to make glass again. I wanted to show that I'm spending my time doing paintings and images. And that's why my glass looked like it does today, bringing the painting and the images into the glass. Some of the cylinders, they have a story. Some related to Me Too, which I think was a very important and necessary thing to happen. But I just don't want women to left after this as victims, because we're not. So this piece is called The Female Gaze. It's almost like a little film. It goes round and round and round and round. And it has all these images on it. The strength of the female sexuality and our lust as well, and our way of looking at men who are straight, of course. Taking up that space that, we are sensual sexual creatures as well, not just, timid little flowers. That could be one work. And then there's other cylinders where it's not as specific. It's much more a process of, intuition, very open process, very searching, conveying a sense or a feeling. If you want to make a decal, it has to be very planned. I mean, I want to make this image. I have to spend so many hours photoshopping and making the film and making the printing and the lacquer and this, that, and the other. I've just used one. I made this. It's dark. It actually has a very beautiful sort of. It's a mix of turquoise and brown, and I found a decal. This decal here. The way I work, it's much more fluent for me, because I never know how it's going to be at the end. I look at it, I do something, I look at it again. I think it's, and maybe it's because I'm a woman and he's a man, but I see it as a feminine approach and a masculine approach to the creative process. And that, of course, doesn't mean that a guy cannot work in the way that I do, of course, but I think the energy is a feminine energy or a masculine energy. I'm very pleased to be at this place and just exploring this. So I can see that I can continue with this it can go in several directions, but it's still about, glass and images.
So that was Nica Carlson talking about her most recent body of work, which she has been able to work during the pandemic. She, in fact, said that it was a necessity for her. And she worked on these existing cylinders that were blown for her at either the Tacoma Museum of Glass or at a residency they had in Corning, she and her husband, or Stefan Dahm. And we are currently just opening an exhibition that is digital virtual exhibition called Fertile Field. You will understand after listening to her why the title, and includes 14 pieces as well, amongst which are the 8 cylinders that she made during this last year. And it is live online now. We can post a link a little later to it. At one point, she talks about the feminine approach to work or female approach to work. And she actually, in the longer conversation, she actually talked about the difference, she was differentiating between her own approach and her husband's approach. And we will hear from him right here. Let's see if we can do this more smoothly. But my screen is a little small to see it all. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna, oops, not that. I'm gonna share here. Here we go. Minor technical difficulties, but here we are. Thank you for bearing with me.
I got into glass by a mistake, by chance. I was actually making pottery. That means I was making tools for industry to make, to bend or to punch holes in metal. And I got a little fed up with this constant precision. And I made a little pottery studio in a backyard, something that used to be a bicycle shed. And then a girl came by and said, oh, we could also do glass. And then we went to the library and we borrowed a book about glass making. And the next day we made ourselves a little glass furnace out of bricks. I threw a little pot on my potter's wheel to have the molten glass in, and it didn't work. This is actually the focal point of the story of my life. It didn't work. So we had to do it again. Several weeks of testing, we actually made it work. So we invented something called glass blowing. So I've actually invented glass blowing.
I'm so pleased I finally found the person who did.
Yes, I did. I realized that it was actually something that was around, and that some of the other guys out there were much better than I. And that will be something like 20 years. I actually became a glass blower, a quite reasonably good glass blower. And because I actually was a tool maker in the beginning, my main interest has always been experiment, how to figure things out and not really to do them again and again. At a point in time, I met Nica and we started having a workshop together. I got a little fed up with that as well. And I started cultivating the things that you are not allowed to do. That would be all the cracks and the soot and the different marks. I took all these mistakes into my little petri bowl. Said, now you are my friends, and now you're going to be something fantastic.
But these are made with intention already, right? They're not just mistakes.
They are very, very intentional. The methods are usually seen as mistakes. Many of the colors you see behind you, you cannot buy them. They are the result of silver foil or could be chalk powder or zircon oxide powder, the different powders that you use in ceramic and pottery that are added in thin layers that creates colors or textures that I've become quite specialized in doing these horrible things.
You made these pieces and then they kind of grew into these cylinder pieces, which are a big part of, for example, this new installation box piece that we are getting. Can you talk a little bit about how you got to those, to the idea of the cylinder?
Many years ago, we went to Grillshop, Nica and I, and we saw some of the guys doing stuff for the chihuli, and I made myself a little chihuli thing. It's not that complicated, it's actually quite easy. I encased it in glass, and then when I poured glass on top of it, it collapsed, and that was not so good. So this block of glass with this collapsed chihuli inside was standing on my table for a long time. Big disaster. But it wasn't thrown out. And that's the mechanism, because some of these grow on you. I still have it. I'm not going to sell it because it turned out to be a really very good little thing.
You learn from the unintentional, from what you are calling, disasters. But in the end, the work that you do make and that you put out, right, they are incredibly controlled and intentional.
At a point, the mistake becomes knowledge. I go into the workshop and I know I'm going to do this and that and this. And then I get half the way, and then there is the own will of the glass. There was a guy who called me the conductor of chance, this play on the accident. Now and then I look at my old images, and it is practically always very unpleasant, because I can see things that I couldn't see at the point when I made it. I'm always very happy to ship you a box, because I think, now this is really good. And then 2 years later, you didn't think that. Oh, please come back to me and be emails. It's a delay in the mind. I don't know what it is. It's interesting and it's very unpleasant, but I'm struggling with it constantly.
I mean, you're looking at it from the glass half empty side, right? The people who own your work and the institutions that own your work, I think, have a great deal of admiration for the artists that you were at the time that you made the work.
And that, sorry for that little ending there. I think the sound was not quite synchronized, but actually the very last images that we showed there are from our installation right here, are an installation from the restrooms at the Ebeltoft Museum of a glass museum that Stefan was commissioned to redesign and make this, make as a kind of installed environment. So that was what we were talking about at the very end there. And it's interesting. I love Stefan speaking about his work, because he always makes these very great one-liners, like he's the conductor of chance, or that a mistake becomes knowledge. I love that notion. And the next person I spoke to was Jeanette Iskandar. And I should say that, you know, this went on over a few days. So I thought that in order to like not be completely disorienting, I wore the same earrings the whole time, every time I interviewed somebody, to provide like a little continuity. I have them on today too. Hold on, I just need to do the next video here to prep it, and then we will So Jeanette actually had a prepared PowerPoint, so we will start with looking at her images, and she's just in a small screen there.
So it's been quite a voyage. I started out actually originally doing fashion design, and I quickly realized that I was doing more sculptural work than fashion design. So I took a class of carving stone in art school, and at that place there was a glass blowing class, and that just really rapidly caught my attention, and I just changed course and started to blow glass immediately. I just got so drawn by the material and the way it moved. Yeah, this is a piece from a series called Between Fragment and Whole. It's a closed sculpture, but it consists of a lot of crumpled tubes, so you can actually look into these. All these pieces are put together, and what has fascinated me with this work, they have a development of pattern in them. They're all kind of connected to the same base pattern, but they're all individuals. It's a process that I start when I blow glass. When I blow the tubes, it's a bubble that I crumble, and when I do that, I start to lead it in a certain direction, and I move with the glass, kind of dancing with the glass, and then I allow the glass to also. I invite the glass's warm and natural movements into the making of these tubes, so it gives a feeling of some kind of original glass movement in the piece. So it starts with this. On the top, you can see the blown bubble, and all these drapings inside of them. And then I cut the piece into little sections, and then you can see in the bottom picture the development of pattern. It's also a quite rapid process. When I put just because I want to use the initial heat from the glory hole, from the furnace. I want to use the initial heat from the furnace, so that original heat in the glass and the original movement of the hot glass. So I do it all quite rapidly, and I just blow a bubble, and I blow it up quite large and pump it up, so it gets a lot of the wall on it. And then when it's still very hot, I just tweeze, I pull in it with the tweezers, and have the glass elongate much more rapidly than it would naturally do. So this is my work, and then it has to kind of just fold together around itself and do all these inner drapings. Before I started to do this work, I've been working with glass for around 4 or 5 years. I knew that I wanted to work with simplicity and complexity. One of the early works. I have this tactile feeling that I also still appreciate in textiles and fashion. And so these are all just or the initial starting from what I'm working with now. One of the things was skin lines, actually, lines from skin, and the different the individual stories we all have, and the traces we carry on our bodies. So I was thinking a lot about skin lines and topography. And then also it kind of developed, and I got to think about I think it's called lino cut technique that was very popular in Denmark in the 70s at least. And that just kind of did some of the same lines as, for instance, a hand fingerprint. These are little drawing lines to me, and I can kind of start to draw with them, and then I also try to put them up in different ways. And I also thought, okay, they could also be feathers. Yeah, so I just, I've been circling around just trying to make a wall piece. I think there's so much happening with the lines of the piece and the drawings of the piece that I would actually like to give it some peace. There's some quiet space to just let it unfold. It has changed a lot who inspires me now. In the beginning, I was, of course, looking to all the great masters. And I still do with great admiration. But now I think today, one of the persons who inspire me the most and who I really consider my mentor is actually Professor Jack Wax. He challenges me in my thinking process of how to live as an artist and be lived, because it is a lifestyle. It's an approach to life. Yeah. He's so passionate and he's really amazing. And I think often we don't talk about glass. We talk about literature or life, or he's just as you said, it's a holistic approach. And I think as I'm turning older, also this is also what I'm learning about myself, is just art is in glass. I don't know. It's an extension of the life that I live and the way that I experience my existence.
So that was Jeanette Iskandar. The next, I have one last video, but that person is also with us today, I believe. Morten, if you are here, can you just wave or say hello? Raise your hand. Are you on?
Hello, I'm here. Yeah, I'm on.
Hi, nice to see you. So I did a quick interview with Morten, but he will be here in person also to answer questions. We are so pleased to introduce his work. It's going to be part of our summer show called The Melting Point, which we are doing in collaboration with Fair and Contemporary, another gallery on the Mass MoCA campus. Before we start here and we move then to questions, I just also want to compliment the Danish education system for what an amazing job it has done, so that we can all hear and listen and understand to every one of these artists, because they're able to speak fluent English. Raise your hands if you speak Danish. I don't think there's going to be that many hands up here. Yes, I see you, Stina. But it's just one of those moments where you realize what an advantage a great education system is. With that in mind, we are going to hear from Morten in an interview here, but then we will hear from Morten and Stina Pitstrup live. So let me just share this. Let me just get myself back in position here. I'm working with a very small screen here, so I apologize for the slight delay here. But here we go.
Hello, my name is Morten Klitgaard. I grew up in Denmark, in the northern Denmark, in a little village called Lundstrup, which is mostly known for fishing and now for tourism. We are as close to Norway as we can get. And as you can see, it's pretty harsh climate to live in. It's a lot of western winds blowing, and because we have one of sand dunes up there, there's a lot of like sand in the air, so it's like everything is a little bit sandblasted. And you can also see on the trees, they only have branches on one side because they can't grow to the west, they need to grow east. It's a beautiful barren landscape, and I learned to appreciate really like small details in it, which have big influence on what I'm doing today. When I was 10, my best friend's parents, they decided to open a glass studio. We were so lucky that we could go there every day, and we could look at them work. After a couple of weeks, everything was like running. We also got offered to try it out. So we put these rods into the furnace to like try to get some glass out of it. But as you can imagine, we didn't know anything about it. So we didn't even know how you should turn the pipe around. So we just put it in and took it out again, and out came this like running, glowing hot honey that we dropped on the floor and it started burning. And I was in love. I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to work with this weird thing that's going to put fire to it. So when after high school, life asked me if I wanted to train to become a glassblower, and if I want to learn it there, and if I want to work for him for some years. And I said yes. I did that for 5 years, did a lot of production, had a really good time. In that period of time, Tobias came up once in a while to rent a studio because he didn't have a studio at that time. It was kind of like in my cards that I had to ask him and Trine if I could come and work for them after the 5 years at Lightspace, and I did. And they said, yes, please come down to MeetUp and work for us. And I went there and I worked for them for 3 years. They introduced me to art glass and this other level of making glass because at Lightspace we were doing production. I wanted to like learn, a bit about art history and design, and I decided to apply to the Danish design school. I got in and I really loved that environment. I really loved that you could spend so much time in the studio and you didn't have to make an output. You can just play around with glass. All the people you wanted to assist you.
Are those pieces that you made at home?
That's my BA project. I was still influenced a lot by technique at this point. I was like really obsessed with technique.
That's understandable given who your teachers and early mentors were.
Exactly. So, I without knowing it, I got influenced.
Yeah.
And then I decided to make my own studio. I made some money, but I didn't make enough to like build my own studio. So I decided to do something else as well. I thought that I was gonna work offshore for a while. So I trained to be a scaffolder and a rigger, and I got a job for Maersk at the North Sea to work for them. 2 weeks work and 3 weeks off. So I did that for 3 years. But in 2015, the summer night, I was given a really simple task. We were going to move scaffolding from one side to the other. But that didn't work out well. I had a really serious bad accident. It was one of these near-death. They thought and I thought that my back was broken. And in this process of like having this near-death experience, I also starting to reconsider what was really important. So I decided that I only want to do glass that was fun. I wanted to pave my own way with it. I needed to like figure out what's important for me to do with glass. I saw that Jack Wax having a masterclass at Glass Museum in Ableton. The first thing when we saw each other, he kind of pulled this note out of his back pocket, and there was like a piece of paper folded 4 times with like 50 words from Richard Serra from what you could do with metal. And he said, pick 3 of these words. I had to pick 3 words, and I picked surface and I picked aging, and there was something else. Played around with aging and surface on this glass for a week, and it was so fun. I mean, it didn't look like anything, but it was just fun to like do something that could look either that or the other or combine them. This is the result of like half a years of like different color testing, alchemy, and figuring things out. I also like to explore and reflect on like places that have a meaning for me, because that was also important for me. After this accident, it was like, what is really important? Where is it important to be? What do you want to do with your life? The first place I started with was just here in my almost a backyard here in Bornholm. There's like a little hill town, a royal residence from the Iron Age. They have found that just a backyard almost, and it's the biggest like excavating on. You can actually see on the soil where there is wooden sticks from where the houses have been. So these pieces is me exploring how that piece of wood would look like when I dig that up. In all of this, I still had this like strong connection to like this honoring the glass tradition, and I kind of looked to like Italy because of my history of working for Tobias and Trine and looking at Venetian style glass every day, and went to school on Bornholm and did my kind of approach to it. And there's something beautiful in this, like this color is expensive because you add something to it, but if you don't know it, it's not. So if you don't know that this color is really expensive, you wouldn't think it's more than just a thing. I want to work with glass in a different way. I want to make my own part. I don't want to work with this internal space that everybody is doing. I still have this huge like reflection and connection to places. So I'm still, this piece here is inspired by a rock that's down here with the water that I look at every day when I went for a walk. So I went back to Lundstrup, where I was from. I started to like remember when we were kids, we went to the beach, we collected the sand, we took it back home, and then we dried it on a piece of paper in front of the fireplace. And then when it was dry, we could take a magnet underneath the paper, and then the magnet would like collect all the iron in the sand, because there is one of the biggest like saying concentrations of this in Lundstrup where I grew up. So I was like, this is also like reminiscent of a way of like giving something from where I was from, you know, like this little piece of land.
Ultra local.
Yes, and adding it to the material as well.
It's like the memory of your home, right?
So I'm still working with this adding. And, the last piece here is now from Bornholm, where I added rocks to my work to do the same, to like honoring this dramatic landscape that I'm living in right now.
So that was Martin Kutgaard. We will hear from Martin, but before we do that, I think I want to give a chance to our last person in the roster, Stina Bidstrup, who actually, and it wasn't in that order that we started working with them, but because Stina was live, I wanted her to go last so that we can just switch fluidly from there to any question and answer. So with no further ado, Stina Bidstrup. Stina, are you ready for this?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everyone. I am here in my apartment in Copenhagen. So should we put on the slides or should I speak a little?
If you, but I don't have your slides because I didn't get them.
Well, I sent them to you.
Okay.
Email, they should be attached.
Let me see. Then can you maybe?
But while maybe you search, I can talk a little bit about my background.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Copenhagen in a family that was quite academic, but definitely everyone is quite skilled with their hands, and so I've always had this balancing or both and of being able to use my hands and wanting to use my hands, but definitely fusing that with conceptual thinking. And I did actually start getting to know glass from a very young age, as an early teenager, around 13, 14 years, very coincidentally. In my neighborhood in Copenhagen, there was a youth school, after school activities that had a glass, an option to play around with glass painting and engraving and fusing and casting, etc. And therefore, the piece that I was missing in terms of exploring glass when I was done with high school was the blowing. And so I moved to Bornholm, this island in the Baltic Sea, and started blowing glass there and started the design school there, learning the craft. And I think in terms of influences, having both a very strong craft education from Denmark, but then also spending years and years and years being a bit of a traveling nomad, going back and forth between Denmark and the United States, has been one of the biggest influences, and sort of getting lots of different both technical approaches, but also different ways of thinking about glass that I'm using both in my artistic work, in my sculptures, in my installations, but also very much in my teaching, and also recently in curation that I've started going into. Did you find the images, Katja?
No, actually, I don't have the email.
Oh, okay.
But what I can do is I can do this. I can put up our, this is from our website.
Yeah, sure.
So let's, and it will advance. So it will show at least some of the work, some of the.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. So let's see. I guess very early on, I was interested in construction of form. I also was this close to going into architecture school, but then the glass won that little internal battle. So construction of form, and then also construction of pattern. And these pieces that are shown here, which were also the focus of my first solo show with Heller in 2018. They're called Architectural Glass Fantasies. And they're sculptures, as you can see, they're blown, but they're also, the way I think about them, sort of like small architectural models of a very imaginative, crystalline kind. They have an inner layer that's a geometric pattern, which the fluidity of glass, of the glass, and the how the glass bubble is molded into the mold, stretches the pattern and distorts it in various ways. And then the outside sort of form language derives from my interest in diving into the art historical background of glass, or in the cultural history of glass, which is also a huge source of inspiration to me, where glass is both history and concept and material qualities all at the same time. And I'm specifically thinking right now about certain avant-garde movements in Europe in the early 20th century, where glass was celebrated as this new building material that could open up spaces and could let in light, and could really sort of be a very almost spiritual and emotional liberation from, of course, the very closed interiors of the past in housing. Sorry? Okay, sound like somebody was trying to say something. And so these sculptures are based on, on sort of the crystalline, on having lots of variations in the forms, in the pattern, of there being no real fixed viewing point, but that the viewer is almost encouraged to also move, as the sculptures are also very much signifying movement in them. In their appearance and in their aesthetic. And I'm also, this piece that's coming up here, being shown here, is a recent series from last year, 2020, or started last year, called Imaginary Crystallizations. They are cast, so solid pieces. They have lots of color variation. As you can see, they have bits of that geometrical pattern in them as well, which you can see if you see them in person and you go way up close and look at the details. And that's a sort of a continuation, again, looking into the cultural and art history of glass, and how glass has taken on the role of mimicking other materials, which is something that it's very, very good at. And here, mimicking naturally occurring gemstones or semi-precious stones that again also have a long history within architectural history. Think of the Gothic cathedral, the colored stained glass windows, that effect that they are meant to have on the churchgoer, this sort of uplifting of the spirit. So
maybe I will find that image of also of the slump pieces, and I'll just put it up in a moment if you want to mention those a little bit.
Yep. So the piece that Katja is referring to is a piece or pieces, a series called Bifurcation Series, which one of them was in the New Glass Now show at the Corning Museum and is in their collection now, which is, so I guess my process is very, I often have many parallel processes going on at the same time along with my teaching, and this is sort of one avenue that came about after having traveled to and lived in India for a while back in 2012 and a little into 2013. Again, I very much always found inspiration from challenging myself in terms of physically moving myself around, and going from Scandinavia to India, as I'm sure you can imagine, is quite a big contrast. And so where Scandinavia is sort of this ordered society, India is in many ways also ordered, but in many ways also the exact opposite. And so I researched and worked with a factory in northern India that produced these beautiful, beautiful glass bangles. This is, simple circular shape to fit around the wrist, but that comes in many different designs. And I collaborated with the factory to do ones that had a delicate, detailed pattern in them, thin stripes or slightly broader stripes. And then these pieces are made from manipulating these bangles in fusing and stretching processes that happen inside the kiln. And they're speaking to, as maybe you can get a sense of, this sort of point of construction, construction of form, but very much in this case where it almost breaks apart. Just stopping the processes of making just before everything breaks apart, and this tension that can be held in a stretchable material such as glass. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, and thank you for improvising. And my apologies.
Don't worry.
I was lost somewhere in cyberspace.
That's fine. You must do that sometimes.
Anyway, so I just want to say thank you. And I am going to open the floor. We're going to open the floor to questions, right, Larry? I don't know if Larry, you want to say?
Yeah, I think we can open this to questions. I mean, I have a question for Stina on the last works that you just showed. Were those all fused together hot?
They were fused in a kiln.
Yeah.
So prepared, stacked in various ways, and then fused in a kiln. And then cooled down and then stretched in a kiln. Although some might have stretched hot in the hot shop. So a bit of a mix.
Thank you.
And we should just jump in to say also that some of those pieces will be included in our melting point show in the summer as well. And yes, Gina mentioned that they represented her work in the New Glass Now exhibition at Corning, at the Corning Museum of Glass. Any questions for Morten?
So, so can you tell us in Denmark, are they starting to, I know that you have some biennales with the Danish Craft and Design Association. Are they doing any in-person art fairs in the fall in Denmark that you know about? Or is everything closed still?
I guess that's a question for both of you, Morten.
Yeah.
Are there any?
I think some are opening in the fall.
They are.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they're gonna do the big one in Copenhagen. Yeah, in late.
And when is that? If people want to go, when is?
Well, I don't. We're going to have Intersect Chicago in November, but I was Katja and I were talking during the week, and for the AACG members, there's really a robust organization with the Danish Craft and Design Association, and also the Danish Arts Foundation, which really promotes artists working in the craft field and in both clay and glass and fiber and wood, really internationally. And apparently the work on, it sounds like many of you have worked in Bornholm. I guess, Matt, do you live there now?
I live there. Yeah, I live here. I'm here right now on the island.
And the Danish have an annual art fair of crafts. So it's something that I think that the AACG should consider in future years for a trip. I mean, I think there's a lot going on that and especially also in Ebeltoft at the Glass Museum, which was mentioned in these videos and in your experience. So I really appreciate you all doing this such long distance and on a Friday evening in particular. And Katja and Doug, thank you for putting this all together. Are there any other comments or questions?
I'm just going to ask one question. So Stina and Martin, do you know if the museum, the Abeltoft Museum, is open right now?
It just reopened, just like the other day, basically, more or less. Yeah.
So if somebody was traveling, if you are traveling in Denmark this summer, you could go visit, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. The plan is to have a Lino Tagliapietra exhibition over the summer, so that should probably be worth seeing.
Nice.
One more thing, that's also the European Glass Context this year on Bornholm, which is in September. So that's another reason for
right. Here. And so we will, maybe we'll send out the dates for that. That's at the end of September, if I remember correctly, right?
Middle, I think, right? Yeah.
Okay. And describe what that usually is. Is it an exhibition? How does it look?
The exhibition is curated by, so there's one big curator, and then she spreads the task out to like different countries, and then there is a curator from each country choosing who they want to represent.
And it is shown where? Like in?
It's going at the Art Museum in Bornholm this summer.
Great.
Well, September.
So if everybody's vaccinated and you feel like venturing out, there's a good reason to go.
And actually, on this island, we don't have any cases, so it's a really safe place to come.
Yes, we're promoting Bornholm. It's free.
Copenhagen's great too. We almost have no cases either. Or
and okay, one more question about the European Glass Context. How often does it happen?
Every 4 years. So
okay, so it's
yeah.
so it's
and it was delayed for a year.
2021 or 2025. That's your next chance.
Yeah, there would be something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Well, again, thank you to the Heller Gallery, to Katja and Doug, and for all the artists who participated in this. We certainly appreciate it. And I'd just like to end with a plug for next week's meetup. We are presenting 4 artists that received visionary scholarships, and all of the AACG members that come to the meetups will have a chance to see how these artists have grown in their work since receiving some seed money for their studies. And it's the first time we've really featured the artists that we've funded through the Visionary Scholarship Program. So I look forward to sharing that with everybody next week. Thank you. I think we can, if anyone wants to stay on just to talk or schmooze, but I think we'll stop the recording at this time, Linda.
Thank you so much.